Okay, so you have that document there. You can see that?
Yes.
Okay. So those are the chief complaints. And so let's talk about after we talked together and did the workup, you ended up with COVID, and they said you had a recent lupus flare up, and Ben ended up with COVID, and then you had the stress of that both together. So, what when you so tell me about what you think is your symptoms of a recent flare up, and how do you feel now after the whole COVID incident, and how long were you out for?
So what happened was I believe it was Tuesday the 12th is when it was. So on Tuesday the 12th, I woke up aching. I noticed my socks, I had to take them off at the middle of the night. So I knew that there was swelling. I usually know because um, I can't wear my socks. So literally don't fit me. They're too tight. And my big toes, it can't handle even the touch. Even when I take them off, can't handle the touch of the blankets. Just really the pressure, I guess. So I knew something was wrong. From that night, I woke up, my body was aching. My neck was stiff. It was hard to turn it. And everything was just getting like really foggy. I guess that's the best way I explain it. As far as being able to think and stuff. And my whole body was aching. That was on that Tuesday. On Wednesday, I had my cardiac rehab. This was on the 12th. It was the most difficult thing, same thing. It just got worse throughout the day on Tuesday. And Wednesday, I made myself get up because I figured, you know what? I know when they tell me when I'm having these flare ups, I need to try to get up, try to move around. I go, you know what? Cardiac rehab will help me. I went and I couldn't even finish most of it. I was just hurting. I was aching. I just didn't feel well. There was no fevers, no any other indications except my flare-ups, and the headaches behind my eyes were happening. So as soon as I left cardiac rehab, I called my Dr. Khan at UCLA, the rheumatologist.
Okay.
I spoke with her assistant and let her know. I go, I think I'm having a flare-up. She goes, okay, let me relay this. She asked what the symptoms are. Short time later, Dr. Khan calls me and does a video, asks me what's going on. I explained to her. She goes, okay, let me call you in something right away. It was like some sort of Z-Pack steroid treatment.
Yeah.
I believe it was a 4-day pack is what it was to get it done. Maybe a 5-day. And she goes,
And this is your physician that treats you for lupus.
Correct.
Okay.
The one that treats me for lupus. After I told her the symptoms, she wanted to make sure I didn't have a fever or that it could, be a cold or a flu or anything like that. So she called it in. She goes, I want you to start it right away. Started immediately. Said, okay. As soon as the pharmacy called that it was ready, we picked it up. I started. That was on Wednesday. So I took it Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think Saturday may have been my last day. And I was starting to feel a little bit less of the swelling. But Friday I had and she goes, if anything else, Friday, when you go to your cardiologist, let him know. He'll contact me right away. Friday, I went to the cardiologist. I had my appointment and everything. I was fine. I was able to get up. I was able to handle it. So I was like, I told him, he goes, I see here that you were having a problem. I go, yeah. I go, but I think whatever she gave me is working. I'm feeling better, not 100, but I feel fine enough to get up. And it was then Saturday, Sunday, it's almost like a feeling of unwell. Like, something's in the back, just not feeling well, but you can't explain it. I just figured it's a lupus still trying to fight. It just the headaches, just couldn't think right. Moving around was hard. And then all of a sudden, I think Saturday, Ben said he didn't tell me, but I noticed that he was sleeping. And I was like, is something wrong? He goes, no, I don't know. I'm just not feeling so great, but it's okay. Don't worry about it. I go, no. You know what? Let's go get you tested. And the only reason we suspected something is because our son in high school, we always get the calls I mean, it's at least weekly or twice a week about him being exposed to somebody. So we go, you know what, let's just be on the safe side. Let's get you tested. Let's see, because he had a fever. That's the only reason. And sure enough, he tested positive. Then on Monday, I wasn't getting better. I went and got tested. And the reason I got tested mostly because he obviously had it. And I developed a cough. And I didn't know if it was a new medication she'd given me, because I do have that night cough I've been getting ever since my heart attack. And where at night I wake up from my cough, it's really odd. But I was getting it throughout the day, which wasn't common for me.
Okay.
And so then I go, let me go get tested. I went and got tested. A couple hours later, they called me that it was, that got the call. It was positive. We found out that they had just started these monoclonal antibody injection stuff here in Kern County. So I set up the appointment right then and there for the next morning for Tuesday.
Okay.
And everything just, I feel like everything helped me. I think it could have been a lot worse. I feel it would have been a lot worse had I not done this I took. The difference between, go ahead.
So you did monoclonal antibody treatments?
I did. The morning after I found out I had COVID. That was Tuesday morning.
How many treatments did you get?
There were 4 injections, 2, one under each arm and 2 in the stomach area.
Okay. All right.
And all done in one day at that moment at the center.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt at that time kind of gave me a little energy or a little, I don't know. I felt like it still felt like a lupus flare up. The only difference that I think was a difference for me was the cough kept progressively getting worse, and it was making it hard for me to breathe. I'd already had a lot of the labored breathing for whatever reason from my heart attack, but I felt that it was just a lot harder and I could not get up. It was the hardest thing for me.
Okay. So
yeah.
Were you vaccinated?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. And did you feel that antibodies helped you immediately after you took them or not?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you were having your infection, did you notice your brain fog was worse, your joint pain was worse?
Yes.
Everything. Okay. And if you have a self-understand, if you have a lupus flare-up, we know your joints hurt and also you get brain fog, right?
Yes. And
do you get blurriness of vision?
Yes.
Yeah. So blurriness of vision, joint pain, brain fog during the flare-up. What other symptoms happen when you get a flare-up?
The headaches.
A lupus flare-up, you get the headaches. And then
the headaches. Yes. The headaches behind my eyes, which is the oddest thing.
Right.
I don't understand it. They're behind either one or the other.
Either one, okay. And do you have any changes in your visual field or vision or difference in color perception when you get those headaches?
Yes.
Both eyes?
Very sensitive to the light.
Very sensitive to light. Okay. All right. So during your COVID infection, it seems like you did get a flare up because all your symptoms did get worse, and then eventually you ended up with a cough. But now, since you've had the monoclonal antibody, and how many days now since the infection? A couple weeks?
Let me see. I tested positive on the 18th of October. So yeah, it's been at least 2 weeks now that.
It's been like 2 weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
And do you feel like your symptoms of autoimmune flare-up are calming down?
Yes.
They are. Okay. And what's still left over? You still have some remnant brain fog, joint pain, headaches, or what?
Yes, but not as bad as it was. I don't know if maybe because I was down for 2-3 weeks, if it's just trying to catch up because I had so much back work and stuff to go over, checking everything, that maybe that's why I'm forgetting so many things to do. Maybe I just maybe it's just trying to catch up and my brain can't catch up quick enough because it all piled on. Instead of a couple things there on my desk, I've got the desk full, it's stacked up. So I'm not sure how to answer that, if which one it is, if it's just because I've got so much on my plate from it, or if it's still foggy. But I do know that my movements, being able to move around, get around, are so much better. My joints, pains, I feel so much better. I don't feel as swollen, even though my eyes and my face, I still have all this
Christina,
swelling.
When you say so much better, you mean in relation to when you first got the infection, right? To now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So, it's really common for viruses to flare up autoimmunity. And, I was involved with publishing some research where we looked at which autoimmune tissues can be flared up with an infection with SARS-CoV-2, COVID. And their brain, joint, all the ones you have. So they're all possible to get flared up. So you could have flared up your autoimmune response, or you could have just had the immune response create so much inflammation that it didn't really trigger autoimmunity, but it added it to the inflammation to where those things are. And it's hard to tell at this point. It doesn't really make much of a difference. It doesn't matter. Now, when we first saw each other, it was a month ago. It was, I think the 8th last month, and we're on the 12th this month. So I saw you on October 8th, it's November 12th now. And I looked at the date when you went and got your first blood test, because I think they made an error during your glucose insulin response. So we had to go back and do that.
Yes.
But that was before the infection, right?
Correct.
Okay. So it's important because we're going to go over your lab test. When we go over your lab test, you just need to know that was not the influence of the infection.
Correct.
Those routes. Okay. So, wow. So I'm glad you're getting through it, but it is a good time to go over your lab test and kind of review all the things that we discussed before, because you've had some issues. Now, when I got your blood test back and I tried to connect with you, and that's when we found out that you were dealing with the infection, and Ben was dealing with the infection, and Ben's got more serious than yours, and so forth. But but your results showed that you may have had some patterns related to a kidney infection. And then I asked you, please, when you talk to your doctor, you said you were talking to me tomorrow, that you were going to make sure they saw that blood test and we're going to check you for your kidney infection. Did they do that?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'd called my primary doctor to let them know, but I let them know, hey, I got diagnosed so-and-so date with COVID and everything. So I think whatever days had passed or whatever. So they said, come in. What we can do is just have you do a urine. Yeah. We'll take a look from there. We'll call you if anything. So I went that Friday as soon as I got better, I went that Friday, went and got the urine. They says, we'll call you if anything. I didn't hear anything. So on Monday, I contacted them. They said, we sent it out for a culture. As soon as it's back, we'll let you know. I got a call a few days later saying that the doctor wanted to see me and go do another urine and maybe some tests. Yep. They said, because it was showing something in the urine, the culture came back showing some stuff.
Yep.
So they wanted to check. So I did go in, and I'd let them know. I actually showed them the labs. So they were concerned, and trying to figure out. So they actually had me go do some blood work. But during that time, because I also went to my infusion, and everything got set up.
Yeah.
My Dr. Khan, because she was contacting me too, which is my lupus doctor, asking how I was doing. I told her, I go, I had some lab work. It showed this. She goes, okay, as soon as you go for your infusion, we're going to have some blood drawn and some stuff. Both doctors were on it right away. So on Friday, they did quite a bit of lab on me. Yeah. I go on Wednesday for my doctor's appointment to get the results. And they also gave me the 24-hour urine.
Okay, just to collect your urine.
Okay. Yes, they gave me that, and they said they were going to check on my my kidney functions and check my flare up and the difference, and try to compare those tests to the new test and see if there was a difference, like what caused it, what happened.
Right. So I think what's happening is the markers I got back, and I'll go over them with you before your infection that you did. I think you did your lab test on the 20th. I think we saw each other on the 4th.
Yes.
So a couple weeks after, and before your infection, you had kidney markers that didn't look good, and then you had white blood cells in your urine, and the combination of both of those suggests a kidney infection. So it sounds like they did urine collections again, but with lupus, you could have your kidneys get injured from the disease. So I think they're trying to go, is this a bladder infection and a kidney disease that may be from lupus, or is this actually a kidney infection? But you did have back pain when I talked to you, right? You said you had very significant back pain around your kidneys, and you still have that?
No, no, I do not. I was, there was, my urine had changed because I was barely going to the restroom, and it could have been because I was so sick and down. I wasn't drinking all the fluids I needed to. I couldn't eat as well.
Okay.
So I didn't know if maybe, and everything was hurting. But I was doing that, trying to do the cranberry juices and trying to just flush everything out. But I'm not having those pains.
Good.
But what my primary doctor, I went on, I think it was on Monday. I had my appointment with my primary doctor here in town. He said, so they had me do another urine right then and there.
Good.
They're still sent it out for culture. He said he was sending it out. This was on Monday. But he said, he goes, I don't believe you have a bladder kidney infection.
Good.
Something on that urine test. He goes, it's not showing that. It's an infection for me to give you antibiotics. It's got to be something else.
Okay.
So
that's what the concern may be, is maybe that you may have had a slight bladder infection and clear that out by this point. And if your kidney markers are still there, then they got to see if your autoimmunity is now impacting your kidney function to some degree. So I think that's what they're trying to figure out. When you see them next, can you get copies of all the labs? Because I would like to make sure we have that for your file.
I will. I can do that.
Okay. So that's kind of like all the stuff you've had to deal with in between when we first saw you, and then you never really had a chance to implement anything yet, which is it is what it is. But what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, is just go over the initial chief complaints, and then just do a quick review of what we talked about we want to do, and then also go over your lab test. And then, because your lab test is going to change a few things of how we want to approach it. So let me pull up the screen again here. So this was the document here where chest pain was your chief complaint. You're still having lots of chest pain or not?
I am.
You are? Okay.
Yeah.
And are you taking your angina medication for chest pains regularly, or you do?
Every day, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I take I think it's 5 or 6 of them.
Okay.
They haven't last time I went for my appointment, he didn't take any of them off. What he said was, you know what? I think that was right after I saw you. What he did say was that he just went over those other tests. You know how I had done the monitor,
yeah,
the I think 14-day monitor or whatever it was, and then I also did the where you walk on the treadmill, the echo stress test.
Yeah. Okay.
So I didn't pass. He said I didn't pass the echo stress test because I couldn't finish it.
Okay.
And then, so he says he's considering doing it again or going a different route with that. And the other one for the monitor, it did detect some stuff on there.
Okay. I mean, it looks like the medications that they have you on is for your angina, getting blood flow, blood pressure, cholesterol, blood thinning, the combination of things if you've had injury to your vascular system. And then when you had your heart event and then went in and got a stent surgery, then they start to realize that this doesn't make sense, and then it's really causing injury there, and it's really autoimmune, and that's when you got sent to UCLA, right? And then that's where they came up with mixed connective tissue disease. You had a positive anti-RNP antibodies, which is it was in your file. I'm not sure if you know.
Yes.
But that's a lab marker that is diagnostic for mixed connective tissue associated with lupus. And now you have your lupus doctor, and now you have like a cardiovascular doctor, and you have really you're really dealing with cardiovascular risk factors, which are the most serious, and then the autoimmunity seems to be driving those risk factors. And now we're trying to figure out a diet, nutrition, lifestyle approach to really optimize your health while you're having to deal with that. So then once we finish doing our exam and workup, we went over, and this was in your report, but goals of clinical management. So then, do you remember this document here? So let's go
Yes,
over that
yes, I do.
because we're still on the same page. So let's just review like what we need to do, and it's nice to have everything structured out. So whenever we forget, we can always go back and then have the plan. We can obviously change this over time. But so there are several goals in managing this case, starting with getting a proper expert opinion on two key issues. So first, ophthalmological evaluation needs to be conducted to determine the presence of any forms of optic neuritis. So have you had the chance to do that?
I scheduled my appointment and I couldn't make it because of COVID.
COVID.
I was sick. It was right in the middle of it. The whole middle of it, I was not able to attend.
Right.
So and it was with UCLA.
Yeah.
The next one that they could get me in, because I guess they're really backed up right now, is not until November.
Okay.
The end of the month.
Okay. So, when I looked into your eyes with the ophthalmoscope, I can see there's some cupping around your optic nerve. And that's sometimes a pattern of optic neuritis where there's inflammation to the nerve itself, the visual nerve. You really have to go see the ophthalmologist so they can really diagnose that accurately, and also to do more advanced evaluations of that, and see if that is accurate. But with the optic neuritis, if you do have that, this is what you want to look for, and this is how you may have flares. When a nerve gets inflamed, there's a different degree of inflammation in one nerve to the eye for vision than the other eye. So if you ever close your eyes and one color, if you look at something and one's red and one's pink, and it's, let's say, a t-shirt that's red, right? That the colors are different in perception from one eye to the other. That's a really strong clinical sign that there's inflammation in that visual nerve. Have you had any of those experiences?
I don't know. What I do know is
right now, take a look at some colors. Maybe if you find target something to look at, you can cover one eye and then cover the other eye. And tell me if there's a difference in color perception between one and the other.
On my left eye, I can't really. Everything's way too blurry. But on my right side, I can see all the colors. On my left, they're so blurred. It's so much.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of them's too blurry.
Okay, no problem. No problem. So if you can't tell, but if you do have if you can check that regularly, if you feel like your joints flare up and your brain fog's getting worse, sometimes you have a flare up against your joint and against your brain, more than likely, then check that out and let me know. But also, when you see your ophthalmologist, if you can please get a copy of the report so we can see, so I can understand what they did and what their diagnosis and everything is as we work together. And then the second goal was for you to get a biopsy, because we found a suspicious mole that had irregular borders and was a red flag. So did you make an appointment with your dermatologist?
No, I believe that's going to be with oh my goodness, what do you call the skin? Dermatologist. Dermatologist. I'm sorry. Okay. So on Monday, I mentioned it to my primary doctor.
Okay.
So he was submitting for the referral. Okay. So I'm just waiting for them to call me for the referral to be scheduled.
Okay, great. And did they examine the mole too?
Yes. So yeah, he right away wanted the referral. Yeah.
Okay. So you're gonna go to dermatologist. They're gonna probably cut it and out or a piece of it, and then most likely cut a whole lot. Send to lab and see if there's any types of pathology there. And then also make sure everything you're saying, give the reports to me, because it helps me to help develop the best plan. And the more I understand what's going on, the more effective we can be in getting the big picture. Okay.
Okay.
Right. So those are the first initial goals, and good job making those appointments and getting that getting that all done. That's really important. Okay, so after that, then we're trying to focus into application of diet, nutrition, lifestyle management, and we put it into several phases. And I put in a report, dietary and lifestyle management goals will be broken down into several phases to address underlying autoimmunity and risk factors for cardiovascular disease and arterial dissection, easily broken down into several phases. Okay, so we're going to go phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and we believe that your vascular injury and insult, and even more so now that I see your labs, is mostly due to autoimmunity and not your traditional cardiovascular risk factors.
Okay? Oh.
And anyways, but the goal was to put you on an autoimmune paleo diet, following the restrictions, 100% avoidance of gluten, casein, lectins, and nightshades, and then evaluate cardiovascular risk markers and total immunoglobulins for development of clinical strategies. And I have you those lab panels now. So we're still like in that stage, phase 1. And then phase 2, which we're not in yet, is once we can figure out how to help you reduce your systemic inflammation. So it's phase 2. Once systemic inflammation is reduced from the diet, then low impact physical exercise, such as stationary bike or water aerobics, other things would be important. And then phase 3, implementation of dietary and nutritional factors to support cardiovascular insulin risk factors based on results of laboratory tests of phase 1. We're going to talk about that some of it now because we have some lab tests. Part 4, autoimmune evaluation, look at specific dietary protein reactions, lifestyle factors, environmental triggers, and potential pathogenic immunological triggers. The laboratory markers will only report if total immunoglobulin levels are within normal reference range to avoid false negativity. So, we're going to, in order to figure out what foods you react to, where the other autoimmune reactions may be, because in lupus, there's multiple reactions in different tissues, and what kind of chemicals you may be reacting to and those things. We just want to make sure you have a healthy amount of total immunoglobulins or antibodies, right? Because the test is using antibodies to measure those things. And your lab tests show they were fine for now, which is great, which means if we did them now, we could test. But I think we really have to work on these other phases and kind of see where you're at with that. But it makes it likely in the future we shouldn't have any problem getting those done accurately without any false negatives, because your immune system is weakened from the autoimmune response. Okay, so then we went over a series of labs and had you do autoimmune paleo diet. We didn't want you to do any additional energy on our part anymore, and then reduce inflammation. So then your blood tests came back, and these were fasting tests. This is the one you did about 2 weeks after we saw you and before you had COVID. So your fasting glucose came back at 97. The range is 95 to 99. So that's within the normal reference range. You can see you don't have any patterns of diabetes. Your hemoglobin A1C is a marker that looks at blood sugar stability for several weeks. Your level was 5.6. Pre-diabetes range is 5.7 to 6.4. So you're still within the normal reference range. You're starting to creep into the reference range for pre-diabetes. But I think once your inflammation goes down and you get a chance to move, and that can make a big impact. And I would actually probably, when I look at your glucose and insulin responses, I don't think this hemoglobin A1C is really as much related to your blood sugar as it is related to inflammation. Because hemoglobin A1C is a measure of like what they call oxidation of your red blood cell. And it can be raised if you have lots of high sugar levels, but it can also be raised with inflammatory oxidative stress responses. And when we look at some of the other cardiovascular markers, it looks like you're really dealing with inflammation more than you are with the high blood sugar. Now, the best test is this test you did here, where you had to go back and check your glucose and insulin levels because the lab didn't do it right the first time, right? So this is the test where they do a blood draw and they gave you that sugar solution to drink. Do you remember that?
Yes, I was there for 2 hours.
Yeah, they gave you a predetermined amount of glucose, and then they compared your reaction to that amount of glucose over 1 hour and 2 hours. So the first thing is your glucose level. So again, in the normal range, without in the fasting state, right? And then then an hour after you had that glucose load, they checked your levels, and the range should be 65 to 120, 199, and you were within normal reference levels, which was great. And they also checked insulin. Insulin is a hormone that goes up after your blood sugar levels. After you get a glucose load, insulin is released by your pancreas to get that glucose into the cell. And your 1 hour insulin levels were 101, and you're within the normal reference range of 0 to 163. So that's showing within the first hour, you didn't have any problems with your blood sugar levels. Fasting, you didn't have problems with your blood sugar levels. And then 2 hours later, your glucose levels were 109. The range is 65 to 139. And then you also didn't have any problems. And then your insulin levels 2 hours later were also totally fine. And that drink you had, I mean, it's pretty sweet. You notice, right? Super
Yes,
Gatorade or something. So this is telling us that, your blood sugar response is actually pretty good. And even
that's
the
great.
marker here for hemoglobin A1C is not necessarily related to these blood sugar fluctuation issues. It's really more related to inflammatory responses. And when we're trying to figure out the best diet, nutrition, lifestyle approach for you, there's always the concern when there's injury to blood vessels to really make sure there isn't any insulin resistance, prediabetes, inflammatory responses that need to be addressed. So right now, as of last month when you did this test, everything looked pretty darn good. Okay.
Good.
So then if we go to the rest of your panel, these markers you see here, creatinine levels going up, GFR going down, which is glomerular filtration rate. This is what had me concerned that there was something wrong with your kidneys. This is what I was trying to connect with you right when you were dealing with COVID. But your kidneys clear out something called creatinine, okay? And there's a marker they use to look at the function of the kidneys called glomerular filtration rate. So this marker here, these markers here, look at kidney function. And then if you look at these markers, you immediately want to look at levels of protein and white blood cells in the urine. So we always run a urinalysis with every blood test. And then when I went down to your lab test here, I can see with the urinalysis that you had some cloudy appearance, which means there's something in your urine. Your white blood cells were elevated in the urine, so those are the signs of an infection. It could be bladder or kidney.
Okay.
And then you have protein in your urine, and protein in urine will make your urine really, really foamy, if you've noticed. Okay.
Okay.
And if you notice if your protein's getting foamy and foamier and foamier, that's a concern. That means your kidneys aren't really clearing out the protein and it's spilling over into your urine.
Okay.
Everyone has a little bit of protein in the urine, but these are above normal levels. So you're 2+ there. They found a little bit of occult blood in your urine, and then they found elevated white blood cells and red blood cells and epithelial tissue and many bacteria all in your urine. And those are all the things you see with either a with a urinary tract infection, whether it's the bladder or kidneys. But these markers here, with your kidney markers being abnormal, is really what suggests that you may have a kidney infection.
Okay.
Okay. So, anyways, your kidney markers were elevated. So I think now what they're doing is they're looking at your urinalysis markers and seeing if you had an infection that's clearing up, and if these are still up and it's not an infection, then they're probably going to want to look at your kidneys and see if the lupus patterns are impacting your kidney markers.
Okay.
Okay, so that's that. Okay, do you have any questions about that?
No, because I had showed that to when I went to do my infusion treatment with the doctor, and he right away when I showed it to him, he was concerned. So was the rheumatologist. That's why they're luckily I got them to do some blood work right away, which was on Friday, and then they gave me that 24-hour urine. So at least it made me feel comfortable knowing that they're on it. They right away, instead of you just never know, and they right away they were concerned.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll figure it out.
So keep me posted on that, and then also if you ever look at your results, these creatinine, GFR, these are all kidney related markers. Okay.
Okay.
And then if we go further down, there's a scale where they look at these kidney markers by looking at GFR. So your level 59, and then if you look at mild to moderately decreased function is 45 to 59. Okay. And then and then if you're like less than 15, that's when you're really worried about the kidneys or and so forth. So that's a number that everyone will be looking at as they do your lab work.
Okay.
And then if you look at the rest of the markers here, the sodium, potassium, chloride, COT, those are electrolytes and proteins, and those can go up with kidney diseases and liver diseases and other types of pathologies, but they're all within the normal reference range.
Okay.
And then these markers here, LDH, AST, ALT, GGTP, these are also markers that sometimes go up when you break down certain tissues. They're all within normal reference ranges. And then they started looking at some iron markers here, total, and those were okay, but then your iron saturation was on the low end. It was 8%, so it should be at least 15%.
And what is that for?
And iron saturation is, so these are markers for iron function, like kidney, like if you become iron deficient. Iron saturation is really a calculation of how much iron is there, but it can be skewed with the kidney markers being off. And if you actually look at your iron levels, they're barely hanging in there. So your iron levels are low. So we think you do have some iron-related issues that may be an issue. So we'll have to keep an eye on this. But right now, when you're really inflamed, not sure what's going on with your kidneys, you got to be careful adding in a lot of iron. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Then you have the lipid panel here. That's pretty good. And then we broke out your cholesterol and all these lipid markers with much more detail. Because remember, one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to look for what mechanisms are causing your arteries to dissect. And one of them are cardiovascular risk factors, and the other one's autoimmune. Okay. The biggest cardiovascular risk factor is insulin and glucose. I mean, that's a significant one. And that seems like it's okay. And then we look at your cholesterol panel. You're all within the normal reference range of just the standard cholesterol markers. But I want to skip to something here. When you did your blood test, we broke down your individual cholesterols, like there's HDL and LDL. There's different particles. They have different particle sizes of those cholesterols. And we want to see if there's any issues with not just your total level that the normal lipid panel checks, but actually the particle size of those. And when you look at these very specific large and small HDL, LDL particle sizes, you're actually within normal reference ranges for all of them.
Wow, that's good.
So even with the strictest models of looking at various types of good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, and then the particle sizes of these good and bad cholesterol, if you look at your results here, you're pretty much in the green with almost everything here.
That's great.
Now, partly, I mean, it's possible that the cholesterol medications, because they have you on lipid cholesterol medications, are working for this. But at any point, for me, it's trying to figure out what we can do with your diet, nutrition, and lifestyle. Something we don't really need to do here, because these levels are all, again, in the healthy green zone. So that's a factor that that's a variable that we're not as concerned with right now. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So that is that. And then we get into the rest of your panel. So this is where, for most people, when they have, let's say, a heart attack and they start to get plaquing, the model that's used in the risk factors associated with their cholesterol and blood sugar and blood pressure and those things. But then the other marker is inflammation. So now we look at some of the inflammatory markers. C-reactive protein.
Yes.
It's really high. So that should be, you like to see this almost non-existent, but less than 1. So you're at 7.05.
Oh.
And this is strongly associated with injury to your blood vessels. So this number we want to see come down. Okay?
Okay.
So C-reactive protein, just think of it as inflammation, and especially inflammation against blood vessels. So that's an inflammatory response.
Okay. And that will affect anything or just my heart?
It will cause, it's a marker for inflammation throughout your whole body. It will cause inflammation. Even if you didn't have an artery dissection, if you had C-reactive protein, it would be a marker to see how much inflammation you have that could be impacting your joint autoimmunity. It could be inflammation that could be impacting your brain fog symptoms. So it's just a marker for systemic inflammation, and it's elevated. So we know your body's inflamed. Okay, so you're dealing with an very clear inflammatory, whole body systemic inflammatory response. But what researchers have done is they've done studies on looking at risk and predictive factors with CRP, and the risk is significantly high for stroke, artery dissection, vascular injury while this is up. So this has to go down.
Okay.
Okay. And then some other things related to that inflammatory response. Let me show you. I measured a marker, it's really important, called oxidized LDL.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of this before?
Never.
Okay. So LDL, you know, sometimes called the bad cholesterol. That's how it's labeled as, and so forth. But it's there to transport fats from your liver into your vascular system, to your bodily system, and so forth. But if it gets injured, then it becomes what's called oxidized. Okay, so
Okay.
so your oxidized levels of LDL are 554, and the normal range is 10 to 170.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So that means there's a lot of inflammation happening in that artery. So when you actually measure your LDL level, they're fine. When you break down LDL to different particle sizes, you're fine. But when you look at what's happening to them is they're getting oxidized. So you have lots of free radicals causing that. And your body's protection against this is to reduce inflammation and increase your antioxidant status. Make sense?
Yes.
So when we're looking at like nutraceutical applications to improve your health, we really want to increase antioxidants, get them in your blood vessel, so we have some degree of protection, since you're having lots of oxidation happening to your fats, which is going to happen in the arteries.
Okay.
And then if you look down here, I did another marker that's very important, trimethylamine oxide, TMAO, and this is a marker that shows when it's elevated, there is a minimum of a 200% increased risk for a stroke. And it's another inflammatory marker of arteries. And this is interesting, is this inflammatory marker is generated from your microbiome.
From my micro.
Your gut, your digestive system.
Oh.
So it's this interesting marker that connects gastrointestinal bacteria and products and how they impact vascular inflammation. So you have TMAO, which is an oxide, it's a free radical. And unhealthy bacteria in the GI tract produce this free radical, and it's linked to destroying arteries and linked to cardiovascular disease. So your gut inflammation, gut health, your C-reactive protein, your oxidized LDL, and your TMAO levels all being elevated really all suggest that you have a significant inflammatory autoimmune response destroying your arteries, which then leans us more to developing a treatment, not treatment, but a dietary, nutrition, lifestyle approach to really calm down the autoimmunity response. When you're looking at your blood pressure, which is controlled, you look at your blood sugar levels, they're good. You look at your insulin levels, they're good. You look at your total cholesterol, they're all good. So, from a classical cardiovascular disease, your cardiologist would probably look at your lipid panel and your blood pressure and think, oh, you're doing fantastic. But if you go a little bit deeper, you see that, well, you have LDL that's normal levels, but they're being oxidized. So they're really getting injured. There's free radicals attacking them. And you have TMAO, which is another inflammatory marker that's not part of a routine cardiovascular workup yet, but that's linked to your gut bacteria having an influence on your blood vessels. So we have to improve your diet, improve your inflammatory state, really raise your antioxidants, and do those things to support your health. Make sense?
Okay. Yes.
So those are the cardiovascular risk factors. Because if you remember, the initial goal is how much of your, so we have, you have your arteries injured, and we have an autoimmunity here with lupus. There's some overlap. What part of both of these we need to do? And it seems like we just need to focus on the autoimmunity inflammation for the most part.
Okay.
At this time. And then these are your baseline markers. So now we can use these baseline markers to determine what direction that we need to go in. You with me?
Yes.
Okay. And then we look at the rest of your blood test here. So let's make sure you haven't missed anything. Your vitamin D, your homocysteine. So we talked about C-reactive protein. Remember, that's inflammation throughout your whole body. Homocysteine is another marker that can destroy blood vessel levels. I mean, is a chemical that can destroy blood vessel health, I should say, or blood vessel structure. So that level's a bit high. So it's not high. It's within the normal reference range. We just like to see that a little bit lower, but that's not our biggest concern right now. And then your thyroid looks fine. Your thyroid functions all within pretty much it's within normal parameters, and even within functional ranges, we're okay with that.
Okay.
And then your vitamin D levels are on the low side. And even though the lab test is 30, most people like to have vitamin D levels in the 50 range. So vitamin D levels are something you take vitamin D, don't you?
I do. I do. And when you sent me the message to take
Oh, when you had COVID.
yeah, I took extra during that time.
Yeah.
Once you sent me that email.
Yeah, I just said it. The research showing glutathione, vitamin D, quercetin may be helpful. Okay. Anyways, so that's something. So what's your vitamin D dosage now?
I'm still doing I believe it's 10,000. 10,000 on vitamin D?
Yes.
Yeah, 10,000.
And how long did you start 10,000? Just the past 2 weeks, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Before that, I was doing, I believe, half of that.
Okay. So that seems like from when we got this lab test, you're on half the dose. Now you've increased it double. That seems like that's probably something reasonable to do.
Stay on it for now, the double?
The double, yeah. You might
Okay.
be on that for some period of time. Another
Okay.
lab marker we checked on was a marker called fibrinogen, and fibrinogen can lead to blood clots. And your levels are within normal reference range, but you are on blood thinners right now.
Correct.
So that's not a risk factor for you right now. And then your white blood cells are within normal reference range. Your red blood cells are within normal reference range, which means you don't have, when you did this test, you didn't have an infection, you didn't have any patterns of anemia, and those were okay. We already went over the lipid particle sizes. Those were all pretty good. And then the last part, I think this is the last part. Yeah. The last part of this is we check your total antibody counts, because if your total antibody counts are abnormal, we can't do any type of autoimmune testing, and we're worried about getting false negatives when you do some responses. But your antibody counts are all within normal reference ranges. So, and we're good with those. So not really too concerned about that. The IgE is on the lower end of the reference range. It's 48. But most of the things we would test you for food and autoimmune reactivity would be on this IgG side, IgA side, IgM, and those are all fine. All fine.
Okay.
Okay. So that's really the summary of what's happening with your lab test. So it seems like we really need to focus on the autoimmune part of it. And the first part of starting with the autoimmune part of it is really just with your diet. Okay.
Okay.
So did you get a chance to read more about the autoimmune paleo diet and try?
I had actually was reading it the whole time until I got sick on what you sent me. You sent me a couple of links, I believe.
Yeah.
Is what you sent me.
Yeah.
And then one of my sisters sent me some links, and a brother did. So everyone was sending me stuff on, oh yeah, this is, take this, do this. So sending me all these paleo stuff. And then I got sick right when we were starting. Okay, which route are we going to take? Which ones? During those, I'd say 2-3 weeks, I mostly was on Jello and soups. I don't know if that was good or not, but that's pretty much what I ate during that time. It was just Jellos and soups. It was the only thing I could hold down. I had a lot of nausea, and I was vomiting as well.
Well, let's say moving forward from you're in the recovery phase, we got to get your C-reactive protein levels down. We got to get your oxidized LDL down, and those are going to be markers. We're probably going to and TMAO levels down. Those are going to be the markers we really want to check. We also want to check your iron panel, see what's happening with that.
Okay.
So one of the things we have to do is develop some baseline biomarkers that we wanted to monitor, because they're specifically related to your risk and to your overall health.
Okay.
C-reactive protein, oxidized LDL, and TMAO, or those markers that we want to check. Okay. So we will probably check those in again somewhere in about 60 days.
Okay.
After we have you really implement some anti-inflammatory protocols and to see if things start to change. Okay.
Okay.
What I'd like to do with an approach for you in your protocol is have you start incorporating that autoimmune paleo diet in. Okay.
Okay.
And then if you can, every week, you can do it whatever day of the week you want, but try to make it the same day of the week. Send me like a sample of your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You don't have to tell me exactly how many calories or how much you ate. I'm not worried about the calorie count. I'm just worried about the food types. So you can
Okay.
say, these are the couple things. These are two or three things I eat for breakfast. These are two or things I eat for snacks. These are two or things I have for lunch. And then let me know what those are so I can make sure that you're not missing anything with the autoimmune paleo. Okay. If it's a certain brand you're not sure about, let me know too. But basically, you're going to be off all grains and gluten and dairy. So you're going to be eating meats, vegetables, and fruits.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I can do that.
Yeah, there's menus and all that stuff there. And then also with each email, also tell me as you've been incorporating the autoimmune paleo, have you noticed any changes in your autoimmune symptoms? And we're going to classify your autoimmune symptoms for now as your joint swelling and pain, okay, your brain fog, and your headaches right behind your eyes.
Yes.
Those are all the things that you notice are always there when you have a flare up, right?
Correct. And the headaches sometimes keep lingering on. So I have been having to take quite a bit of that Imitrex because they still keep coming on.
Understood. Okay. And so the headaches, the brain fog, the joint swelling. Am I missing anything? Those are the main ones, right?
Yeah, I think with the headaches behind the eye, I think that's caused a lot of my blurriness. I'm not sure what's going on,
Okay.
but like you said, my eyes have to get checked. But yeah, there's something definitely getting worse on my eyes.
Right. We want to see, for example, as you go into the autoimmune paleo, do your headaches stop? Maybe when you're off like gluten in some of these foods, your headaches stop, or maybe they're half the time, or they're not as intense. Maybe your joint pain and swelling go down by 30%. So when you send me a weekly update about like what your food choices have been, then also just give me a summary of what's happening with your joint pain, brain fog, and headaches. Okay.
Okay.
And then the third thing, if you can give me an update, is with what's going on with any changes, what's happening with your current medical management, with your lupus physician and your cardiovascular physician. Make sure you let me know what happens with it. Make sure you get a copy of the dermatology report, and make sure you get a copy of your eye exam by your ophthalmologist and see what they say.
Okay, I can upload every single one on them. Next week, I have 3 appointments. I have one with the cardiologist, one with the neurologist, and one and my infusion treatment.
Okay. So I'm going to recommend some supplements for you. There's some things we can't use because you're on some medications that are blood thinning and some of the anti-inflammatories may have some issues with them. Okay.
Okay.
But we want to really we want to give you some antioxidants immediately to really help your quenching of your oxidized LDL. All right. So I like to use something called glutathione. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to have you take something it's a liquid. It's the liposomal glutathione, and it's a very, very powerful antioxidant.
Okay.
And a liquid liposomal form allows it for better absorption. It's a sulfur. Now, it's a sulfur amino acid. It's got a little bit of sulfur taste like garlic, but it's not too bad. And I want you to do 10 milliliters of it. Or let's have you do 5 milliliters twice a day. Actually, you know what? In the acute state, let's have you do 10 milliliters twice a day for now. Okay?
Okay.
And then I just want to start working on your gut as you're making some changes here, your microbiome. I'd like to put you on something called that are short chain fatty acids. So there's some compounds called butyrate, propionate, acetate, and those short chain fatty acids, they have a really good impact changing your microbiome. Because remember that TMAO?
Yes.
That's up. And they also have a very powerful anti-inflammatory effect throughout your whole body. So I'm going to have you take some short chain fatty acids. And I'll email you this so you don't have to worry about spelling and all that stuff. And then the third thing that I want you to take is just actually I want you to take 2 more things. want you to take something for like repairing your gut lining from inflammation,
Okay.
like glutamine, zinc carnosine. It's basically nutraceutical support for leaky gut. Okay.
Okay.
And then lastly, it'll be like a scoop you put in water and you mix it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you drink in the morning. Once you do it in the morning and then so twice like morning, and I'm gonna have you take your supplements just morning and nighttime, so it's not too difficult for you to.
Okay. Okay. That's what I do with my medications right now.
Okay. And then the last one will be like a powder. It's there to support just general inflammation. And it's kind of like they call it like a detox powder sometimes, but it's your liver has pathways called phase 1, phase 2 biotransformation, and it helps support your gut microbiome. And we're going to put you on something like that.
Okay.
So you mix 2 of those with water. You take the liquid solution of the antioxidant. You take a few capsules of the short chain fatty acids. I'll give you write down specific numbers for you. And then what you're going to do is continue staying on the 10,000 IUs of vitamin D, and then keep following the diet. And we just want to see what happens with that in the first stage so far. Okay. We could go in there and do a lot of autoantibody testing and going into the autoimmune a little bit deeper, but I think we should kind of just get through this first phase first and find out what's happening with your dermatology report and your ophthalmology report, and really see what's happening with your diet and everything. Are you okay?
Okay.
Are you okay
Yeah, no. Yes, I am. I can find these like at the GNC or.
Yeah, you can find them online. I'll give you a link. You can order
Okay.
everything online. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, let's see. Do you have any questions for me? Besides that?
No.
Okay, Christina. So let's try to connect again in a month. But in between that month, send me an email each week. So what'll happen when we talk in a month? I'll just pull up all those emails and put them like on a sheet I did like again. Then we'll go through all the stuff. If I see like a red flag or something like that with the email you send me during the week, I'll just respond back to you. Okay. And if you have any questions, just send me that as well.
Okay, I will do that. And then since I've got all my appointments 3 appointments next week, I'll also send you all the results and everything.
Yep. So remember, each week your meals, what you're eating, how it's changing your joint swelling, brain fog, headaches, the third thing is any changes or any new information you have from your medical workups with your team you're working with.
Got it.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you, Disease.
Thanks.
Bye.